Good morning, my dear friends. Today we have honor to welcome at our peace conference Božko Picula. Božko Picula is an assistant professor at the University of Zagreb at the Faculty of Political Sciences of the University of Zagreb. He graduated with a degree in political science, a master's degree in international relations, and a doctorate in comparative politics. He was a lecturer of the year at the Diplomatic School of Zagreb in a couple of times in a row. He is an important person of the movie scene in Croatia and in Western Balkan because he is a lecturer of movie festivals and writes great movie critics. Today, Božko will talk about Southeast Europe between a post-Cold War, New World Order, and the new Cold War conflicts. Is regional peace sustainable? Božko, floor is yours.
Dear Professor Bando, dear colleagues.
2 seconds. 2 seconds, because we can hear you. Only 2 seconds. You look great. We can see you. You look great. But we need to hear your voice as well.
Dear Professor, do you hear me? Do you hear me?
Can you check once again? Your computer is maybe something on mute.
No, I'm not mute.
Okay.
I'm unmuted.
We will check now with other options. 2 seconds. Can you say something, please, Božko?
Do you hear me?
Yeah, problem is with us. Okay, 2 second problem is with us. It is not with you. Sorry.
But we are using headphones. Definitely not.
Can you try once again? Sorry, Božko.
Do you hear me?
No.
So yesterday we were on someone's house in Berlin again. I remember. So maybe you should just.
Klaus checked me. Yes, she just.
Sorry, Božko. Can you go out and come back? Sorry.
I don't.
Can you go out from the Zoom and come back? Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry. Božko? I think I started. Yes, but we can't hear you.
You hear me?
I don't know what is the problem, Božko.
Do you hear me?
We are in one of the rooms of Inter-University Center, and you know that the technique is not always the best friend of us. Sorry.
You hear me now?
Oh, now we hear you.
Thank you very much. Every problem is solved here.
No,
So.
wait 2 seconds.
No, I redirected to the this one, but
We find some solution. I think, I hope.
okay.
What? Speak again, please, Božko.
Do you hear me now?
No.
No.
Oh my God. Okay.
Now,
Now.
Do you hear me now?
You're like now in the TV show.
Okay.
Oh, that's good. Can we do it that on this way? Because you know you are going now through some other computer and.
Okay. Everything is.
Yes, I think everything is fine if we can hear him.
Okay. Because the picture is perfect and I hear you so well.
Yeah, you know that I'm too loud. That's my problem. Actually, that's not my problem. You know, I have the microphone so long in my hand. I will try to sing now. It's too long in my hands. Yeah.
Seems that this cable is not working.
Interessant.
No.
But it should be okay for the computer, yeah.
We can get the sound to this notebook, but it can't send to this one.
Yeah.
And it seems that something wrong with this cable. Yeah.
But the room is small, I think we can hear even only from the computer.
Da, idemo to odraditi sada da mi čeka i idemo bez dana.
So, you know, we find one solution, but IT team want to.
We are muted, she didn't hear you before. Now we're not muted.
No, turn off.
Do you hear me?
Please.
Do you hear me?
Yes.
Please, can you continue so that we see if we can hear you, please?
Okay, do you hear me now? I got my presentation.
Is the mic closed?
No. Okay.
We can hear you, nothing. Just leave the laptop.
Yes, please.
You hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you very much. I can start?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, dear
Wait 2 seconds. No, it's not good. Come on. Allow us a couple of seconds to try to do really perfect. Sorry.
No, everything is fine.
Sorry, please.
Oh, yeah.
There's some of
Yeah, it's great. It's,
AUX mode.
Premonition, huh? That was rude. First things first, the weed whack. You wax your weed. Super easy. Win.
Bosko, can you?
I can hear you. Do you hear me?
Yes, Bosko, thank you, please.
No.
For this everything, you will have, of course, your 15 minutes longer time. Thank you.
No.
Please.
We got enough time. Dear Professor Bandov and dear colleagues, thank you very much for your attention, and this is great pleasure to be with you virtually, but I hope it will be very interesting for both of us. Well, we are talking about, in this moment, about the greatest crisis in post-Cold War Europe, and my topic today is Southeast Europe between a post-Cold War New World Order defined by former American President George Bush Sr. and a new Cold War conflict, I can say defined by actual Russian President Mr. Putin. And my question is regional peace in this part of Europe, Southeast Europe, actually sustainable? Well, 60 years after the peak of the Cold War, it was the Berlin crisis of 61 and the Cuban Missile Crisis 62. Europe and whole world are facing the greatest crisis, as I say, of the relations between the former Cold War rivals. The beginning of this year brought an escalation of the Russian-Ukrainian war, the biggest war after the wars after the collapse of former Yugoslavia. In Europe, of course. At the same time, the southeast of our continent, specifically the Western Balkans, is going through the greatest political crisis since the end of the wars in the former Yugoslavia. The center of this crisis is Bosnia and Herzegovina, our neighboring country, where the political representatives of countries all three constituent peoples, Bosniak, Serbs and Croats, have failed to reach a very important agreement which puts this year's parliamentary election at risk, supposedly leading to the disintegration not only of a political system but whole country. 30 years after the end of the Cold War division of world and specifically European continent, the former leaders of military political blocs seem to have more conflicted relations than during most of the conflict that marked international relations after the Second World War. This phenomenon can be most clearly identified in the unfolding Russian-Ukrainian war, but also in our part of continent, Southeastern Europe, which was the most divided part of the European continent during the Cold War. Although this war, political war, ideological war, did end polarization in international relations, primarily in terms of ideological confrontation between the political West and the political East, the former socialist federations of the Soviet Union and Yugoslavia have not resolved their internal conflicts yet. After the former Soviet and Yugoslav republics gained independence in the beginning of the 90s, these internal conflicts became external ones, and the international community had to react to them. Primarily, it was the case in the Western Balkans, where the former Yugoslavia was dominant state, politically dominant state. Due to its uncontrolled disintegration in war, the international community was completely engaged to resolve these conflicts for an entire decade during the 90s. This is former Yugoslavia and the successor states, Slovenia, Croatia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Serbia, Montenegro, Kosovo, Macedonia in the beginning of 90s, and there are 7 successor states today, Slovenia, Croatia as the members of European Union, with Montenegro and Northern Macedonia members of NATO, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Serbia, and partially internationally recognized Kosovo. Where is the problem? The Soviet Union, on the other hand, did not experience the fate of, I called it Yugoslavization as the process in 1991, as the as the disintegration in the series of violent, ethnically conditioned conflicts, yet the former Cold War superpower disintegrated by agreement between its largest republics led by Russia, Ukraine and Belarus. Immediately, some parts of the former Soviet Union were exactly Yugoslavized, notably Armenia, Azerbaijan, Georgia, Moldova, as well as Chechnya as the part of the Russian Federation, and last decade, Ukraine. The country avoided a general war in that time of disintegration by agreement of then elites of individual republics. In this process, very important for that moment, the new Russian leadership led by President Boris Yeltsin decided to respect the existing borders between the former Soviet republics and, for example, in the first half of this decade, did not support the demands of pro-Russian separatists in Crimea to secede from Ukraine and to be annexed by Russia. Well, it was 30 years ago. On the contrary, in Serbia, the largest former Yugoslav republic, the policy of disrespecting the borders among the republics of the Yugoslav Federation and their military transformation according to ethnic principles led to wars first in Slovenia, then Croatia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and finally Kosovo. The worst conflicts broke out in Croatia and Bosnia and Herzegovina, while NATO's military intervention against Serbia took place in Kosovo. I must say, it was the first post-Cold War conflict with elements of Cold War rivalry in Europe. This conflict almost led to the first armed confrontation between American and Russian forces and hinted the removal of ideology from mutual rivalry did not remove other, more permanent reasons for the conflict, specifically political ones. The Russian-Ukrainian war, as well as the crisis in the Western Balkans from Bosnia and Herzegovina to Montenegro and Kosovo, testify that a new pattern of rivalry has been formed after the Cold War. Its poles are still the same as in the Cold War, yet their interests have been de-ideologized and reduced to the issue of control of key resources, and it is explained by theory of realism in international relations. The main features of the new Cold War are cohesion within individual states based on national identity as first, the primacy of the interests of the state, and the use of power in the pursuit of these interests. As we know, in the original Cold War, it may have been possible to win based on ideology, with control of certain territories primarily used for ideological purposes, but in its current extension, control of territories and resources assumes the characteristics of conflict as modeled in the First World War. Well, this is another map. This is Ukraine with its ethno-linguistic characteristics and division. Not similar to former Yugoslavia, but with the main basic characteristic. After the collapse of the Soviet Union and its own marginalization in the 1990s, the Russian Federation seeks to, I can also say, re-imperialize its position in Europe and the world, which leads to conflict with its neighbor, first Georgia, then Ukraine, and other world powers, primarily the United States and its European partners. The driver of post-Cold War crisis and wars in this part of Europe is the dissatisfaction of Serbia, which after the breakup of the former Yugoslavia remained separated from other ethnic Serbs residing in Croatia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Montenegro, and Kosovo, also seeks to redefine relations in the region. It is not surprising that due to historical and contemporary foreign policy interests, Russia and Serbia have a lot of common, and it's normal, namely in the Eastern and Southeastern Europe. The proclamation of Kosovo's independence of 2008 after the war in 1999 backed by the international community, namely the United States and Western allies, was the first subnational level change of Europe's international borders. I think it's a key point for the many characteristics of today's situation. Since the end of the Cold War, in reality, the former socialist federations of Soviet Union, Yugoslavia, and Czechoslovakia were succeeded by the federal republics. In this process, the borders among republics between the units that once were federal republics became international borders. In the former Yugoslavia, Kosovo was an autonomous province within the Federal Republic of Serbia, and this is position of Kosovo in the context of Serbia as the former Yugoslav Republic and today's independent state. Kosovo's independence, with the events of 2008 in Georgia, which lost political control over its Republic of Abkhazia and the region of South Ossetia after the integration of former Soviet Union. It was a parallel event. After Georgia tried to retake both of these areas militarily in August of this year, Russia intervened militarily and defeated very quickly Georgian forces. Russia recognized the independence of Abkhazia and South Ossetia in the same year when the West recognized the independence of Kosovo. Exactly 6 months after this event. In this way, the war disintegrations of certain parts of the former Yugoslavia and the former Soviet Union in 2008 gained new momentum because there was a different intensity of international recognition of parts of those countries that did not have the status of republics and successor states of these federations. Following another internal crisis in Ukraine during the winter of 2014, Crimea declared its own independence in March and was soon annexed by Russia. Finally, in February 2022, Russia recognized the independence of other two areas in Ukraine, namely Donetsk and Luhansk. The precedent related to Kosovo has thus benefited Russia the most, which, while opposed to Kosovo's independence, has partially denied the immutability of borders between some former Soviet republics and now independent states since 2008. While during the Cold War, the Soviet Union applied the, as you know, limited sovereignty doctrine formulated in 1968 by then Soviet leader Leonid Brezhnev, thus justifying that the Soviet Union's military intervention in Czechoslovakia amid Prague Spring, Russia increasingly opted for the revoked sovereignty doctrine since 2008. Brezhnev's foreign policy doctrine implied that the community of socialist states has the right to military intervention within a socialist state if there was an attempt to overthrow socialism and establish capitalism. The current Russian foreign policy doctrine, personified by Russian President Vladimir Putin, goes a few steps further. Not only does it limit sovereignty of a state under the military intervention, but it takes away part of the territory under the sovereignty of the home state, namely Georgia and this year Ukraine. The Putin doctrine was already used in the wars in the former Yugoslavia, or pre-Putin doctrine, in the first years after the end of the Cold War, when Serbian rebel forces in Croatia and Bosnia and Herzegovina declared their independent republics on military-controlled territory. The frozen conflict, or in the war scenario, delayed conflict in Bosnia and Herzegovina, represents a political situation in which, after the end of the war, the previously conflicting parties have not been resolved yet. The Serbian side, endorsed by Russia, which gained its own federal unit within Bosnia and Herzegovina, is emphasizing demands for full independence as a transitional phase to unification with Serbia. This is strongly opposed by the Bosniak side, the green one in this map, as the most numerous in the country, which seeks to abolish the ethnic principle of internal organization of the country, while the Croatian side seeks refederalization or its own federal unit. The Croatian side is a yellow one at this moment. Russia also supports the Serbian side in Kosovo, which, with partial international recognition, is in fact divided into a larger southern part with an Albanian majority, the green one, and a smaller northern part with the Serbian majority, the gray one. Although the Serbian side in Kosovo participates in the work of the central government institutions and goes to the polls, it ultimately counts on the division of the country, with the northern part of Kosovo belonging to Serbia, because it is illusory to expect the whole Kosovo back under Serbian sovereignty. What can we say as the conclusion? The new Cold War and the thawed conflicts in southern Eastern Europe are actual situation. The new Cold War, the same as the first one, also has its actual and potential proxy wars. Along with Eastern Europe, from Moldova to Ukraine and Georgia as the Russian zone of interest, the southeast of the Europe and the Western Balkans has the highest potential for these types of conflicts. The interests of the following powers can clearly be discerned: the United States and the European Union on the one hand, and Russia and increasingly economically present China on the other. The model of unilateral secession of ethnically defined territories began in the 1990s in the former Yugoslavia and is now spreading to parts of the former Soviet Union that Russia considers its exclusive areas of interest. The armed conflict in Ukraine is not only the biggest European and world security challenge after the end of the Cold War, but it could also become a kind of weak war for other crisis areas of the continent, especially in Southeast Europe. Well, this is my presentation, and this is two pictures as a conclusion. The first one is Sarajevo, 1994, and second one, of course, New York in 2001. Thank you very much.
Professor Picula, thank you very much for your interesting presentation, a very good one for this first session of today. And we have just around, well, I don't know exactly how much time we have, because we're, 10-15 minutes at least for discussion. So I open the floor for our participants.
Thank you very much, Professor Picula. Going ahead to comment from Zagreb University, I would like to ask you on your opinion of the EU role in the securing the sustainable peace in the region. How do you see the latest developments there, and what do you think will happen in that sense in the future?
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, and thank you for your attention. Well, I think the model of a Cold War, historical Cold War, repeats today, even when we are talking about the role of the major powers, United States, Russia, and new world power, China. Unfortunately, European Union does not have the mechanism to intervene strongly in this type of conflicts. It has mechanism to prevent some problematic steps in the Southeast Europe, and I do hope that wish of all Western Balkans countries, Serbia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Macedonia, Montenegro, to be parts of the European Union is the most important political goal of this region, and that is as we know, the soft power of European Union. It can't intervene militarily, but it must be very important diplomatic actor in this region. Well, the war in Ukraine is a war that show us that disintegration of former Soviet Union wasn't the final process. I don't know what is about former Yugoslavia. I do hope that current international borders are borders that will exist in the future, but the situation in former Soviet Union is, I must say, completely different, because the wars in the region of former Yugoslavia did not have the power like Russia is, because Russia has power to change the situation in the area of Soviet Union. Serbia wasn't that type of power and can be under the influence of European Union. So European Union is soft power in this moment, but for resolving the conflict, I do believe we need a much more stronger one.
Thank you. My name is Jordan. I'm coming from Tirana. Actually, congratulate for your presentation, and it was quite interesting. I just want to make a short comment on Kosovo case. Basically, as you are aware, the conflict in Kosovo is not young. It is older than 100 years. So it was not related with dissolution of former Yugoslavia. On the other hand, taking into account that basically, although it had the status of province, yet it was equal with all the others. They even had the chance to run the former Yugoslavia as presidency at once. I can recall you Fadil Hoxha. So basically, there was no difference in terms of all the features of a republic, regardless that they were part of a province. And basically what I was, let's say, curious to ask you is that, taking into account that right now Montenegro is part of NATO, Albania has been before, Croatia is part of NATO. Okay, Serbia has signed kind of partnership, although it's between Russia and NATO, but still it is our neighbor, so we have to cope and to deal in a very peaceful manner. That's the only way. But don't you think that NATO presence in Kosovo and also in all surrounding area, because even military speaking, Serbia is surrounded by NATO countries, so there is that can receive aid or whatever other channel countries. So don't you think that this is enough for peace? Because we may have clashes or we may have uprisings, just like a few days ago in Kosovo, but still I don't think that they will be able to be considered as being armed conflict, because armed conflict will require at least Serbian army to be part of any conflict, which I don't believe they have the capacity and neither are allowed to do it.
Thank you very much. It's an excellent question. For the beginning, I must say that former Yugoslav Federation was the federation of 6 republics and 2 provinces, because Serbia was the federation in federation, and till 1989 it was federation, because Vojvodina and Kosovo had the power to change Serbian constitution, and Kosovo was really the part of Yugoslav Federation, also the Vojvodina, and it was changed in 1989 when Slobodan Milošević changed the Serbian constitution. So Yugoslav Federation was the federation of 8 parts, 6 republics and 2 provinces. For example, the Albanian politician was the president of Yugoslav presidency. And it was the part of Yugoslav constitution from 1974. So Kosovo is real special case when we are talking about internal and external law and its own recognition in 2008. Also, I agree that NATO is some kind of very strong security cushion in the region, but we can't avoid political crisis because conflicts can be latent with political problems and also can be armed conflicts. I do hope that this part of Europe can avoid the armed conflicts, but the region is full of political crisis and political moments that could be the potential risk for whole region, as we see last few days in Kosovo or all these this year in Bosnia and Herzegovina. So NATO is absolutely the most important security actor in the region.
Thank you, Professor, for your presentation on the new Cold War. I am personally very skeptical about this this debate on the imminence of a new Cold War, and I think that if we talk about it enough, finally we'll get what we talk about. I'm not saying that there is no heated rivalry today among powers, and it's clear that we're living a moment of tension, but there is a big difference between the Cold War and the moment we are living right now in the international system, which is that the Cold War was confrontation on deeply diverse ways of seeing how the world order was supposed to be organized. And China and Russia, as much as they oppose the liberal system, do not have systematic aspirations. They strive for regional independence and regional control. They live very well in a world that has a strong state sovereignty and strong national autarkic political traits. They do not propose multilateral governance solutions that are alternative to the Western system.
I thank you very much. I agree with you. Well, this current configuration of international relations has some elements of former Cold War, but it's absolutely different situation because in the past we had two very clear positions of two blocks, and today there are several major powers with their own interests. So this is some type of new Cold War, but as I wrote, a new Cold War as a metaphor, not as the completely renewed situation from the past. So I agree with you. And I must say, what is the new difference between two separated parts? Is it democracy, autocracy, or something else? So I do believe that this war in Ukraine will show that we must revoke the position of multilateral cooperation as the system that saved the world after the Second World War. So something is missing, and I do believe it's multilateral cooperation.
Božko, allow me actually to ask you, when we are talking about the situation of academic community and so on, and then one of professors and former ambassador, Božo Kovačević, he gave a lecture in the first day on, is the Second Cold War the only way to avoid the Third World War? So, it is somehow, it looks like better to be in Cold War than in another kind of wars. So, when we are talking about region, is it possible maybe to somehow to avoid Cold War if it happened in our region as well? So, is it possible, for example, that somehow Serbia stay on the same side as other countries? Or, for example, what will happen with Hungary? Mm-hmm. Hungary is a part of European Union, of course, NATO, and of course somehow belong to one side, but everything what Mr. Orban do is somehow differently for that what we have on this side, mm-hmm. for example.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Professor Banda. I do agree with a colleague from Macedonia, because the best thing about the historical Cold War is that it didn't provoke the actual war. And the basic point of Cold War is that it was rivalry between superpowers that didn't want the real war. And fortunately, it ended in 1991 without war. So I do believe that the elements of historical Cold War in this moment also will lead to the situation without the big war between the greatest power. And unfortunately, war in Ukraine is, as the wars in former Yugoslavia, horrified. With so many casualties, and it must be stopped. But the best thing in this moment is that I do believe two powers, United States and Russia Federation, do not want to do real war between them. As we can hear, nonetheless, the many awful sentences from propaganda's, media's points. So, as colleague also have mentioned, I hope that NATO's presence in this region can prevail real wars. So every country in the region, and Southeast Europe, and also in the Central Europe, has its own interests. But Serbia, Hungary, Croatia, Slovenia, Macedonia realize interests without wish to military intervene. Hopefully, it will be the model of behavior in near future. So I'm optimist about the situation without ongoing military conflicts in this region. Many political crises are present, and unfortunately many conflicts did not resolve, but there is no possibility to provoke military intervention with results like in the 1990s.
Thank you, dear Božko, on very inspiring lecture and great discussion about Southeast Europe. Is regional peace sustainable? We are really lucky to hear your analysis on the political situation in Southeast Europe region, and please stay optimistic as you are in this lecture and as you are actually in regular basis on all your comments, especially in T portal. Thank you for that. Can you bring some optimism in our society? Thank you. And of course, sorry once again on the technical issue. Sorry. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Boško. And now, in our program should be Professor Majka from Poland, but he has some problems and he asked if it's possible to avoid today. He will give lecture on another day, we will find solution. But now we will continue. Yes, our young colleague is already ready. So we are lucky to have in our conference room Claudio Antonio Claus Jr. He is currently a law student pursuing master's degree in Brazil. Claudio received Fordham University School of Law Diego Barbarisi Moreas Memorial Scholarship, and in 2020 Religious Liberty Fellow as a part of the Reuben Clark Law Society Religious Freedom Fellowship. He has also been deeply involved in several international projects in Azerbaijan, Canada, South Africa, Costa Rica, and the United States. He looks so very young, but it looks very experienced as well. So we are happy today that he will speak on the very important and interesting topic, very practical one, that's pro bono work, peace, and SDGs, an experience report of a student and researcher of the Alto Vale do Rio de Peixa University Law School at the Center of Legal Practices. Please, Claudio, floor is yours.
Well, thank you all. Thank you all for the opportunity to be here today, first of all. So, as introduced, I go by Klaus normally, and I'll be happy to share a little bit about my experience at the Alto Vale do Rio do Peixe University. So, I try to put together three important things that happen there: the pro bono work, the aspects of peace, and the SDGs, and how that all come together in the work that we do in our legal practice center as part of the university. Also, as my orientator for this work, we have Dr. Levigius. Already. So, just to give a little idea, an introductory remark about the project, the idea of pro bono work, peace, and sustainable development goals really have close related ties. So, we have a common understanding already that pro bono work is that work done for the underprivileged or people who have a need and normally can't pay for lawyer fees, right? So access to justice along with independent judiciary, they are necessary, right, for all people really. And the pro bono work really is a way for that access to justice to be improved and to be allowed for all. And all of that comes together to bringing people the dignity and the possibility of accessing justice, accessing our justice system. As we have spoken several times during this conference, the SDGs also play an interesting role, especially lately, right? A long history of different goals have been going on before even the Agenda 2030. We did have the goals for the millennium before, right? And now we are looking into these more specific and actionable goals, and this access to legal assistance really plays a role and brings in the table the possibility of making those bridges and making the connection that people need to solve their day-to-day issues, really, the contracts, everything that goes on into a regular person's life, right? So SDG 16 focus on the rule of law, and that facilitates success for all other goals. Yesterday, our speaker mentioned that, right, as a catalyzer for other goals to be fulfilled. So just so you have an idea of where the location of my university is, so here we have the map of Brazil, and then in the very southern part of Brazil we have Santa Catarina state. Inside of the state we have my city up there, and then here just a few of the landmarks in the city. Well, so for context, I'd like to mention to you a little bit of the history of the region. So Caçador is in the region of the Contestado War, the biggest civil war that ever happened in Brazil history. It just completed a little over 100 years. It was a guerrilla war for land between settlers that settled down in that area, and later the Brazilian state came into that area because of a big international project to build a railroad that would connect the state of São Paulo to the state of Rio Grande do Sul in very southern Brazil. So that was considered a peasant community. So it was a very rural community with not that many resources, of course. And they just saw their economic life, their social life, their religion, everything was disrupted. And as put by the author of this quote here, by international capital in a way. So it was the first time that an aircraft was used in a war in Brazil. So that was the first register of it. And then we had over 7,000 army soldiers, over 1,000 local police, and 1,000 civil militiamen that fought for the government and for the possibility of building the railroad, while there were about 10,000 of those rebels and settlers that were fighting for the right to stay there, right? And that resulted in over 8,000 deaths. Also, to add a little bit of the context, going forward to nowadays, the persistence of hunger and poverty in many ways is seen as one of the results from that war that ended about 100 years ago, but still left its marks. And it made me aware of how much that can happen when I had interactions with you in the last few days. So now let's fast forward continually to the city of Caçador nowadays. So we have a couple of the most recent census data, and that's from 2010, so it's not super updated, but it still can give you a pretty idea of what I want to, the picture I want to paint here is really to show the need for pro bono work in the area and how many needy people there are there. So we have up to half of the, we have about 29.2% of the population which lives with up to half the minimum wage in the country. So that would be about 220 euros per month. And when we think about that and think about a South American, Latin American country, that may sound like, oh, those are very cheap places to live in. But when you put into perspective that the minimum wage would be about 440 euro, then you realize that the minimum wage has to do with what is the minimum amount you need to live a regular life in that place, right? And then about almost 30% of that population does not have access to a full minimum wage. And then according to data from that same census, about 2022, individuals were in extreme poverty in that area. So they would make an income of about 16 euro per month, so a lot less. Now bringing the Center of Legal Practices, which is the place where I currently am a part of as a student there in the Alto Vale do Rio do Peixe University. We have under the university's Faculty of Law a pro bono clinic as part of this center. And what we do there is to help the general population with different civil matters. So we don't do criminal, right? So child support, divorces, conservatorships, contracts, all of those things. And this legal center handles about 560 lawsuits involving the most diverse civil areas, as mentioned. Every law student that goes to the law school has about 2 years of experience inside of that environment, right? So having the opportunity to talk with the population, to understand their needs and to try to solve them accordingly. and under the direction of the professors. And we received the demands and filed the lawsuits along with those professors. Also, before filing those suits, depending on what is necessarily the matter of the suit, we also have the procedure of go through conciliation if that's the case. Also, the students are nominated by the local judiciary to become conciliators. So we receive some training and then have the opportunity to run those small audiences and try to help people in any way we can to get to a conciliation instead of legalizing all the matters as well. Because one of our goals is also to help the judiciary not to be stuck with as many lawsuits as they are already, right? So just a few brief conclusions about this experience. In my perspective, the academia then plays a role in promoting peace by equipping these future lawyers in the legal profession for peaceful conflict resolution in their areas of work. We have also pro bono work allowing students to experience conflict resolution in firsthand, and then that access to justice that is promoted and this peace in somewhat of a personal scale can be reached. So that's somewhat of an illustration of the think globally, act locally principle. And this is the presentation I had to share with you today. I also brought some references about both the war in Brazil and also some of the reports regarding the Center for Legal Practices. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Klaus. That was very, very interesting. I was just commenting that this is a really, really good system, in my opinion. And people sitting next to me with professors and lawyers and students then learning and doing good stuff and pro bono work. This seems like a really applicable system for basically anywhere in the world, in a way. So congratulations on that. That was very interesting. Do we have any questions or comments apart from the one I gave? One more.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much for your presentation. I have to say that as working in an NGO, we benefit from this kind of initiatives and lawyers that are really so good to try to help in our projects and in our organizations in this kind of pro bono work, because this is true that the world has become a very legalized place, and laws and understanding the laws is every time really more a need, not only something that maybe in some moments of life you need, but again in Egypt, for instance, the taxation laws, they change every 2 months. So so every time you do the salaries for the people, you have to know exactly if something has changed in the last weeks, because it's just almost impossible. And we are still an organization. I imagine, for instance, for small companies, how difficult it has to be. And so this is for me the question is how scalable is this? Because you're talking about a very small or a very concrete initiative. And the problem is that this is a global issue, actually, and I don't know how possible it is or how easy or complicated it is to widespread this and to create like a real network, maybe regional or I don't know, in a country. I mean, how feasible is this? And also, which is the amount of lawyers or law students that are really ready to offer this service? Because in most of the countries, people become a lawyer just honestly to make money. I mean, I studied law, so not for this reason, but I studied law, and this was the thing. So this is a job that is going to bring a lot of revenues, and this is sort of an oxymoron somehow. Thank you.
Well, thank you for your question, and I do agree with you. There are so many concerns about that, and I do believe it should be a good practice. And I know that many of the law schools in Brazil do have a program that is set up to help out the community in a way as well. So I do believe that it is scalable, if all or a great amount of the law schools or the universities can provide and be a part of this network. What happens in a global scale, if we were to think about that, is that Brazil, for example, has law schools in pretty much every city, or that would be a big generalization, but all big cities will have universities and will have a law school, and that is a whole different picture in other countries. When you imagine, for example, the United States, right? There's a lot fewer law schools. I'm sure Brazil has, I know, over 2,000 of them, and the US, as far as I know, has a little bit over 200 of them. So the intake of students might be bigger and all of that, but in the end, I feel it could be hard if we were only to rely on that. That's why also the public-private initiatives and such different partnerships can be done in a way that becomes feasible in different countries. So it really depends on the reality of each country. In Brazil, universities could do that. That's a way to get it started. But I'm sure that without the help of all lawyers, without the help of many other organizations that are fighting, in a way, fighting the same fight, we wouldn't succeed only as academia by itself. So I do believe that it is possible and scalable, but it just depends on finding the right stakeholders to make sure that the project can live on.
Thank you, Klaus. And I think that's very interesting, and it was really interesting for me. And then, I thought, is it possible maybe to implement something like that in my country as well, at the University of Zagreb as well? So we have already the clinic, but I'm not sure that the law clinic, but I'm not sure that students actually are learning enough about SDGs. So actually, I want to ask you about SDGs programming at your university. Do you have curriculum on SDGs, or SDGs are included in some curriculum already, some existing curriculum? So for example, in international law, but you are learning then on SDGs as well. Or is SDG really the full curriculum of full semester, for example? That's the first. The second is actually when we are talking about this kind of program you attend, my question is actually, is that in every university in the Brazil, or especially in your university? The third question is actually, do you have this kind of model somewhere online that we can see that and that we maybe can copy paste it in at our universities? Because I think that is really something necessary. Of course, look, pro bono work in justice system is something what is usually, but actually only 5 or 7 or 10% maximum. And we need that much more. So that's a couple of questions I have. I have actually the additional question is personal question, because I saw in your CV that you have so international experience, like in Azerbaijan, Canada, South Africa, Costa Rica, and so on, United States, of course. Is it usual situation for your countries, the students, or you are unique? And how that's coming from? Is this only your personal choice, or maybe some professor pushed you to do that internationally?
Well, great question. Let's get started with the first one. So about SDGs and my university. So I would say there was a bigger push for SDGs in the last 2 or 3 years in the university. We don't have a necessary course for SDGs, but in the master's program, we do have a big push for it, especially. So I wouldn't say as much in the law school, and as I asked some of the participants before, it's just so hard because in the academia, I feel like the professors already have so much to teach, right? And then when you just add another thing and another thing, so it becomes really hard. But I do see some professors with an active desire to make sure that we are aware of at least what the SDGs are. And I was very lucky to have Dr. Levias, my orientator, because he has made his research regarding sustainability a long-term thing. So in his classes, oftentimes we'll hear a lot about the SDGs and their importance, and he's always publishing about that as well. So that's one of the inspirations that made me want to understand better about what the whole agenda is and how to make sure that it is correctly implemented in our country. Question number 2 about the Centers for Legal Practice. I'm aware that most law schools have. I can say for sure if all of them are mandated to have one in order to have a functioning law course. And if they do, I'm not sure if they are mandated to do pro bono work. So I guess it's different steps, right? So every law school, and then everyone has a law, its own Center for Legal Practices, and then whether this center offers pro bono work or not. So I'm not able to say if that's a requirement, a prerequisite to make a law faculty work or a law school work. And I would have to research on that to make sure and let you know later. And third question about my international background. So since high school, actually, I had a big desire to understand how the world works, and had a deep, really desire to understand what happened. What happens everywhere else. So it grew out of a personal curiosity, really. It's not the case for most people, and I have felt really privileged in many ways to be able to be here today, and I do recognize that. I'm a first generation student as well, so that has been very interesting in many ways. My immediate family has never traveled outside the country, so it has been very, very nice for me to have this possibility, and I feel highly privileged of that, you know, knowing that in where I live and in the spaces that I go, that I have this opportunity to have this exposure so much, and definitely, yeah, it's been a personal thing, really. I don't have necessarily a big push to do that, and I'm always trying to look for different opportunities. So as I said, since high school, looking for that. So I guess I clicked on so many opportunities to go abroad by now that the social media algorithms are just sending them to me. So whenever I open them, I open social media, something pops up, go to this conference in this place, and I've been very fortunate as well to find organizations that help to finance and to fund those opportunities for people like me, to make sure that Latin Americans have a place at the table at important debates such as this one.
Dear Claudia, thank you really for your inspiring lecture, and thank you for this short discussion. I'm sure we will have actually discussion later, because as I said, you know, it's something what I really think we should implement in our universities as well, especially topic on SDG. Only shortly, you know, with Professor Pizzula, and I see he's still with us, we organized at the diplomatic school, I think 7 years ago, the full curriculum on SDGs. Sustainable Development Program and international cooperation that was supported by European Union, and we have actually now 7 years very unique European program at the University Libertas in the moment, but this was really amazing opportunity to work on SDGs. And you know, I introduced a couple of courses together with the first speaker, keynote speaker, academician Schmaus. We introduced the course on SDGs Agenda 2030. That was, you know, something so unique. That was 10 years ago. You know, that was unique, and nobody knew about SDGs. And I'm really happy now to hear that you have the actually the laboratory on SDGs at your university, and this is amazing because the SDGs are really important. You know, we are talking today about peace. But without climate change, without accepting that we live in the world in which everything changing, we live in totally new paradigm, and climate change happened. It's happened. Sustainable development. We needed much more people actually
to support SDGs and everything what's happened in the world. And that's something what we miss, and SDGs are here to support us. Thank you once again. Thank you. And I see we have already next speaker with us. Today we are very lucky to have at our conference Blagoj Tsonev, assistant professor at the University of Tourism and Management in Skopje. He is the president of the Center for International Development Studies in the Northern Macedonia. He published a lot of papers and books, edited as well. He will speak together actually with Jana Ilieva, but I see you are alone today. But I'm sure you can give a great lecture. Please, floor is yours. And today you will speak about the role of academic community in creating public opinion for promotion of peace in conflict societies. Vlade, floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much, Professor Bandov. Unfortunately, Professor Ilieva cannot join me because she is ill. So I will speak alone on the subject that is called the role of academic community in creating of public opinion for promotion of peace in conflict societies. So actually this is a research that me and Professor Ilieva finished a couple of weeks ago, and this it's not only for Macedonia, but it's mostly for the Balkans. But at today's presentation, I will speak only about the Macedonian case and the role of the members of academic community in the creating of the public opinion in the conflict societies, such as Macedonian one. So if we start with the history of the Macedonian conflict, we can see that it's not a religious one, and mainly it was a political and ethnic one. So for that reason, we started our research in the public showing of the academia members, of the university professors, of the so-called analysts, of the publicators, and people who publish in the newspapers. So the first one that we saw and was that there was a known acceptance of the members of the Macedonian Academy of Sciences and Arts, that the geopolitical status quo not only in Macedonia but also in the region is changed. So let's say the actual president of the Macedonian Academy, Professor Ljupčo Kocarev, started so-called nationalist rhetoric in the last couple of months against the agreement between Macedonia and Greece, the agreement between Macedonia and Bulgaria, and he also called for the Ohrid Framework Agreement that was signed 2001 year after the finishing of the Macedonian ethnic crisis. But it's not only Professor Kocarev who is president of the Macedonian Academy. Also, the great influence in the media had the opinion of one other academician. It's Katica Kulavkova, who is Macedonianist, and she is studying, she is researching the Macedonianism and Macedonian language. And she started with so-called nationalist calls on media, especially on TV shows, about the rechanging of the political situation and the status quo in the country. On the other side, we have so-called pseudoscientists or people who are non-stop on TV shows, or they are non-stop writing for newspapers, but they are with special PhD diplomas, such as from Ukraine or Moldova or Kazakhstan or Uzbekistan, and they are working, of course, for money reward to create public opinion. Unfortunately, they are teaching at universities in Macedonia, but they are also so-called experts in everything, and we have problem with that because they are presenting themselves like members of academic community, and they are creating a public opinion that is more right than center. And the center point of view is that Europe is going right now, and they want to take their popularity on the right wing ideas. On the third side, actually, is the phenomena of Levica, or the left, is the new political party in Macedonia, and they have two deputies in Macedonian Assembly, and they have strong connections with Russia, and they are using their members as bots on social media to create anti-Bulgarian, anti-Greek, and anti-Albanian some so-called manifestation in the Macedonian society. Also, when we are talking of when we used to research the incompetence of the academic society to get out from the hands of the major political parties. So in this part of our research, we started with so-called paid analysts, or I'm going to be on TV show tonight, so I'm calling the chief of the political party or somebody who is in charge for public media in political party. They are giving me instructions. I'm get paid for that, and I'm just saying what the party need to be said, but not from their mouths. So we have so-called paid analysts who are teaching also at universities. Especially the great phenomena is that a lot of them I used to get their PhD, and after that, because the party, especially VMRO DPMNE and the Social Democratic Union, and after that I will go to speak about DUI, they just put them and position at some of the universities in the countries. So this so-called paid analysts are non-stop on TV shows. They are using their aggressive style to say what they want to say, and we don't have center point of view in this case. We have only left wing that are proteges of the Social Democratic Union, and we have only far right wing that are proteges of the VMRO DPMNE as two major political parties. As I say, I will speak for Albanian parties, Albanian situation after. And lots of from these analysts are using the situation, especially now with the showing that at the moment when Macedonia is finally member of NATO, and we finally will start, or we started the negotiation process with the European Union, they're using a phrase such as, we want to become a member of the European Union, but not at every price, not on every price. So actually, they're saying that they are not interested to become Macedonia to become part of the European Union, because they know that they cannot use the political power, the power of the political parties, to put them on such positions, not only at universities, but also at members of boards of state agencies, state enterprises, etc., etc. So the other question here in this part of the research is the Albanian academic phenomena, or hyperproduction of members of the academic society from Albanian ethnic origins. We are in Macedonia, especially, we are witness that a lot of Albanians used to not to be educated during the Yugoslav era, and after that, after the independence of the Republic of Macedonia in 1991, they formed a university in Tetovo that was recognized after that with the Ohrid Framework Agreement in 2002 from the government of Professor Vlado Bučkovski as Tetovo State University. And the interesting fact and phenomena for this is that every functionary from DUI, or Democratic Union for Integration, of Ali Ahmeti, former or present, is also a professor at Tetovo State University. And after their political career is done, they just start to be professors at Tetovo State University, and some of the major Macedonian televisions are inviting them as analysts, and for that they start to create opinion in the Albanian society, but not also only in the Albanian society, but also in the they start to create political opinion in Macedonian Muslims, in the Turkish ethnic group, with the Roma, etc., etc. And also we can see in this phenomena that they are working only if the leader is going to bless them to say something. And once I was a guest at TV Telma on one TV political show with a professor of Mother Teresa University in Skopje, that is also one so-called fictive university, because they are state university, but they have only professors. They have no buildings, they have no amphitheaters, they have no teaching rooms and something like that, but they're functioning. And when we started to talk about, when we were talking about the Macedonian radicalism, he was very active in that. And when we started to talk about the Albanian radicalism in the Macedonian political status quo or situation at the moment, he just became silent, and he said nothing. He only said that Albanians were jeopardized, that they they had no minority rights before, etc., etc. So, as conclusion for our research, we started with the idea that the academic media needs to restart the public opinion without political influence. So the first thing that we should make in Macedonia, or in North Macedonia, for me it's Macedonia actually, is to make difference between so-called political analysts that are members of political parties and the independent researchers who are trying to get money to make one or two independent research during one academic year. So we cannot find actually money for our independent researchers because all of the money of the university are going to the political stipendists, to the stipendists of the major political parties in Macedonia that are professors of the universities in Macedonia, and all the time they are only speaking in favor of the party that is protéging them. So, because none of the political parties wants to stop the nationalist rhetorics, we started to research also the idea why every year, every election year in Macedonia, the so-called academic analysts are starting the so-called Macedonian national question, and they are calling the right positions and they're calling for unification of Macedonian people. Let's say yesterday was the greatest Macedonian national holiday, Ilinden, when we started the uprising in the fight against the Ottoman Empire in 1903, and after that the anti-fascist assembly in 1944 on the same day. And our president, Mr. Stevo Pendarovski, he just, because he knows that in 2 years he is going to be re-elected, and he is also a professor, university professor, he just started with nationalistic rhetoric against the so-called French proposal. First, 2 weeks ago, he spoke that he hadn't read the French proposal, but 2 days ago he actually said on TV that he was one from the team that made the so-called French proposal. And when we are speaking about the so-called French proposal for starting negotiation between Macedonia and the European Union, let's say that the political parties are using university professors to speak against the French proposal, even they hadn't read it actually. And the main analysts stated their thesis like something like that if it is okay for Bulgaria, then cannot be okay for Macedonia. And with this sentence, we can find the classical political manipulation of the political parties through the controlled members of the academic community to create a political view of the population, or to change the idea of the peace in a conflict society as the Macedonian one. Why I'm talking about conflict society as the Macedonian one? Because we have 1/3 Albanians living in Macedonia, and they want to be they are just tired with the Macedonian ethnic problems with the neighbors actually. And for that we will be conflict society until the moment we join the European Union. And for that I'm talking about promoting peace in Macedonia from the academic society, and academic analysts will start when we will shut the doors of influence of the political parties on the so-called political analysts that are teaching our kids at universities, and they are creating public opinion about how the peace should be. And for that I will say against again for the president of the Macedonian Academy. He said 2 days ago that the Macedonian Academy will start a new project to make a revision of the Ohrid Framework Agreement, of the Prespa Agreement, and the Friendship Agreement with Bulgaria, and that the Macedonian society and Macedonian state finally need to become a Macedonian national state and to, let's say, to stabilize the Macedonian identity with their research. And as we know, the academicians in every country, they are from one different era, and from the era of Yugoslavia, let's say in the Macedonian case, we know that nothing good will come from Macedonian Academy regarding this point, and probably some of the political parties will use the academicians and the professors to put influence on for them creating ethnic conflicts during during the election period or in the election year or something like that. So we as professors, I can conclude that we as professors and creators of public opinion must understand that Macedonia will be conflict society until the very moment that we will become rightful and fully member of the European Union, the first thing. And the second thing is that we have to understand that we cannot go on TV just for money. There is something like academic integration, there is something like dignity, and we must know that when every hour presence on the political debating shows or every hour analyst is creating public opinion in some of the groups, even Macedonian or the Albanians or the Christians or the Muslims and that. So that is our research that we finished actually 3 days ago, and just before the Ilin then. And it was very pleasure to present it here, and it will be very pleasure for me and Professor Ilieva to be our research to be published from the Croatian community of the Roman Club. So let me say something in Croatian. Hvala vam puno što ste nas pozvali i što sam uspeo da dolovim nešto okolo Makedonije. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Conev, for this interesting presentation of your research with Professor Ilieva. I now open the floor for our participants. Let me ask you the first question until we get ideas from our other participants. For many of us, especially in the region, Southeast Europe or Western Balkans or whatever we call it, Macedonia is an example of how slowly and, in my opinion, how incorrectly a process of approach of a country to European Union can go. It is very often stated as the example of how things should not be done in Brussels, how European Union is undermining its own values and its own respect outside of the Union, and how countries like Macedonia, but especially Macedonia, have done everything that was in their power and still were kept in the waiting line for years and years. My question is, do you think, well, first of all, of course, do you agree with that? Because if you don't, then it would be harder for you to
Yeah, I agree, actually, yeah. It's not fair for Macedonia, but, you know, in international relations, we must understand the real political photo from Bismarck, and that is Macedonia. It's a very small country with no influence, and that's the reality in the international relations.
But the main question of mine is, do you think that things in Macedonia would have gone differently than they are now, and would have been different that they are now, had this process been faster, had it been more streamlined, had things happened 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago, instead of only now beginning to happen? Do you think that the situation within Macedonia would be different, that people would have a different relation to each other, especially the ethnic groups, and as well to their neighbors and to European Union in general? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Definitely yes, because with the starting of the negotiation process, we will start the reforms in Macedonia, and especially the reforms in judiciary sector and in the public prosecution office also. The other thing is that with the starting of the negotiation process, we will lower the corruption in the political parties, because at the moment, let me paraphrase former Greek president Konstantinos Mitsotakis, who said for the last Greek king in the modern era, Constantine II, that he is social carcinoma, and he must be cut. So the corruption in Macedonia is something like social carcinoma and must be cut, and it cannot be cut only by cutting Vamarodapamane from the power, because I don't know if you are in touch with the things. The present coalition between the Social Democratic Union is also with the Democratic Union for Integration. It's Albanian party, and it's the most corrupt party in the world, I will say. But if not in the world, in Europe, definitely. And we need to start the negotiation process just to reform the Albanian community, because they must understand that the corruption is not the cure, it's the disease. And for that, we need a cure, and the cure is healthy judiciary system, revision of the public prosecution, etc., etc. And all that processes will start with the starting of the negotiation to become a member of the European Union.
Thank you very much for your answer. Do we have any? Yeah, we have another question.
Hey, greetings. So as a political scientist, it really interests me when someone uses the term the most corrupt party in the world. How do you measure that? What are the variables that put in place, and what you compare it with to come to the conclusion that a party is the most corrupted party, even in Europe, even within a country, right? And how is that corruption manifested within the party structure?
How is the corruption in the political parties manifested is the question. Am I correct?
Yeah, you're very correct, yeah.
Yeah, the corruption in the political parties is manifested in the society, because if you want to get a job in public sector, you have to pay. If you want to get a license for digging water, or let's say warm water, you have to pay it at the Ministry of Economy, where the minister is in the last 12 years from Democratic Union for Integration, and every businessman in Macedonia have to pay for every license and for everything to get just to start with business, or to get the business. And also we have one phenomena that there is a member of the parliament who owns a petrol company, and his brother is mayor of the smallest and the poorest municipality in Macedonia, and his son is getting all the state tenders for oil, for gas, for petrol, and for etc. etc. And it's like that the things happens with the political corruption.
Blagoje, Professor Bandov is here back. Please, it was really interesting to hear your analysis on situation, political situation, but academic situation in your country. And it doesn't look actually very good. And how we can improve situation? Do you have any, because when I'm in Macedonia, I'm not sure how to improve society. If I have to improve my society in Croatia, somehow I know what we have to do to be better. But when I'm coming in Skopje, when I'm coming in Bitola or some other cities in your country, somehow I think, my God, that's really goes so far away. When you spoke about the situation in Tetova, when you're talking about, especially with Vimero, the PMNE, the situation doesn't look so good. And what we can do to improve situation on the better way, of course. And I will only shortly. I will give actually right to a colleague of mine, Professor Coleman, when he mentioned the problem is not only on Macedonian side. The problem is actually on European side as well. So Europeans, we made so many mistakes with Macedonia, so many opportunities we lost, and somehow the problem is on European side. We are too many concentrate on our issues, the Brexit, Euro. It's always some problems, some challenges in European Union, but doesn't actually. When I'm thinking on Macedonia, we need to help you. That's for sure. Do you have any examples what we can do?
How to improve the academic sector in the higher education, actually. How to improve it? Let's say there were two changes of the bill for higher education bill or law in the last 10 years, and the both of them were catastrophic or disaster for Macedonia. Because let's say I will take the Bulgarian example. If you want to become a docent or assistant professor in Bulgaria, after you get your PhD, first you have to become a chief assistant, and you to become chief assistant you have to take exam. After taking that exam, you have to you need 2 years practice as teaching. After that, you have to take exam for docentura or exam for assistant professor to publish 10 or 5 or 10 scientific papers in Scopus, EBSCO, or Web of Science in international magazines. And after that, after you take the exam, the academic board of your department will decide if they will recommend you to the university senate to elect you as a member of academic community. It's very difficult way, but the first thing what European Union have to start with Macedonia in the process of the changing of the situation in higher education and the academic community is to stop financing the very same people for everything. So let's say I will take, for example, the Konrad Adenauer Foundation. They are working only with three professors. Friedrich Hebert, they are working only with 5 professors, and everybody from that 5 professors, they have their NGO, and Friedrich Hebert or Konrad Adenauer are giving money for research only to that professors. And let's say last academic year, we have a project from Konrad Adenauer that they gave lots of money to 4 or 5 professors, and they just get from one university to other to give to all of their colleagues or professors their opinion about the European Union and Macedonia process. And I was guest at one of that shows, let's say shows, where the son of the former Macedonian president, Georgi Ivan Ivanov, who is now university professor at Tayyip Erdogan financed the International Balkan University in Skopje, said that the European Union, maybe it's not the way for Macedonia because it is exclusive club for Protestant and Catholic countries in Europe, and that maybe we, the Orthodox, as mainly Orthodox country, should look to the east, and maybe we have to look for alternatives. So I couldn't understand why Konrad Adenauer Foundation will fund such thing and such research, but they are giving all the money for research in academia, for organization of summer schools, for organization of international conferences only to 5 or 6 persons, and they're working with them with ages. So European Union, and especially the leading countries are not only in the European Union but also in the region, like as Croatia, like as Greece, Slovenia and Bulgaria, must suggest to Brussels that the money for the academic community must be given correctly to everybody, not only to the same people. For first instance, for second thing is that let's say last year at one of the faculties of the university in Skopje, St. Cyril and Methodius, one of colleagues of mine decided to apply, and the dean of the faculty, I will not say who, just call her and say, please do not apply because you will have more the most of the points to be elected, and we have instructions from the top level for the 2 positions who to be elected as one as associate professor and the other as assistant professors at that faculty. So the European Union and our regional partners that are members of the Union must suggest in Brussels to see what is going on with that kind of corruption in the academic community.
Blagoje, you surprised me actually. I know you very well, but you surprised me actually today that you are so really honest and you're talking really honest about your society. Probably if we all will speak about society so honestly, the world will be much better. Everything what's happened in your country actually happened in other countries as well. Maybe not on this level, but almost similar. Of course, I understand your position, and we are responsible for our societies, and we want to improve our societies. And thank you for actually to speak so honestly about the situation. When you talk about the Konrad Adenauer and the other foundations, German foundations, you spoke about German foundations, but this is actually for all foundations, the same. I have already talks with different chiefs, CEO of foundations, you know, and they say, you know, but it's our way, how we do. I say, come on, it's wrong way. It's wrong way. What is actually your goal? You make some goal in Berlin, and what is your goal? Is that really your goal, or what? You know, and this is what you spoke about, this geopolitical situation, and what the Ivanov spoke, what is the direction of Macedonia, Northern Macedonia. So
it's absurd, actually.
Yeah. You are. I very agree with you. So thank you once again on your very honest lecture. Thank you for this great discussion. Please, many greetings to Professor Lieva.
Thank you very much, Professor Tomic.
Thank you once again. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a nice day. Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Now we will have